if you're able to establish a culture from the beginning, whatever you do basically in your business becomes your culture, right? Every kind of activity, whether it be, for the core business or if it's just like a support function, every activity that's taking place within a business ultimately becomes your culture.
Before you go into any company, you have a career plan, your goals, what you want to achieve. Getting into an organization, you shouldn't dump that plan. So we have two incredible people joining us today to discuss our topic today. We have Chinwe. Chinwe is a HR professional. She's worked across the entire HR value chain, and she's currently managing HR function in our organization. And then we have Tomiwa. Tomiwa runs Star City Management Services, an advisory firm which handles strategy and business development for SMEs and growth stage companies going into new markets. The company also offers recruitment for C-suites and technical roles. Thank you for joining us, Chinwe and Tomiwa.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I think we'll just go straight into it after this introduction. So today we're just talking about the not so good HR experiences that we've had, whether from an employee perspective or from an employer perspective. So Chinwe, we'll start from you. Just share with us an experience that you've had, not so good experience, HR experience.
Okay. Hi, Ty. Thank you for having me here. So I made a transition to a new company a couple of years ago, not the current one I'm with. And we're going through some changes in terms of structure, in terms of, and business needs. And it required us to do some form of, restructuring of the business. And on the brink of doing that, even to have a conversation with the team members that this was going to happen, the CEO decided to be absent from that conversation in person. I think being a very sensitive discussion, he needed to be there in person. And then all of a sudden, when decisions were made, restructuring happened, he up and disappeared for a while.
Wow.
And it was not a good look because people became very more uncertain about the future of the business. So that was a very, very difficult position for me because as HR, I had to try to pacify people, let them know that things were going to be okay. But at the same time, there was a disconnect in terms of communication between the leads and the CEO. So it did create a panic. So that was a very, very, very unnerving incident. Yes.
And I'm sure that would have painted HR in a bad light, as though HR is the one responsible for that.
Exactly, because we needed to give answers and I didn't have answers. So it was very difficult. Yes.
Thank you. That's an experience that lots of people would have had because, you had people in your organization, both the leaders and also the direct reports that they have. And again, HR didn't have explanation, neither did the leaders also have any explanation because the CEO had absconded, so to speak. Thank you for sharing that experience. Tomiwa?
So I guess I have experiences from multiple perspectives.
Amazing.
Right. So as an employee in a very large organization, as an employer, running a startup, and also as a consultant providing advisory services to clients. And obviously dealing with personnel is a very sensitive issue. Absolutely. And so there are challenges that come up from time to time. I'd probably say that speaking as an employer, right, and having to deal with the competence side, performance management, and also dealing with the ethics in a business has proven to be a bit challenging at times. When you have, even with dedicated, HR within your organization, right? You have challenges maybe on the employee side, right? So your, employees maybe are not necessarily adhering to some of the policies that your HR has put into place. And mind you, a lot of companies, particularly like in Nigeria, Nigeria has probably about, over 95 or so percent of its companies as either micro or small and medium enterprises, right? So the majority of businesses in Nigeria are companies that are maybe between under 200 employees, right? So they're small businesses, and a lot of times the responsibility of managing personnel kind of falls to the wayside because it's more about like driving the business, right? And small business owners tend to not necessarily have all the tools and skills to be able to manage those properly. So from the perspective of a small business who maybe is using an outsourced service for HR, you definitely have steep learning curves, right? Which can, the same issues can repeat over and over and over again. And just coming back to sort of like the ethics component of it is the personal integrity of your employees is something that you can't really safeguard against without putting proper structure in place, right? So if you don't have those things, you're relying on your employees to do the right thing, right? And oftentimes you can't really kind of measure what, you can't really kind of guide them to do the right thing because you're so focused on your business. You can't really put in controls for them to do the right thing by your business. So managing that as an SME, I would probably say has been one of the, maybe not so favorable part of managing human resources, right? Because even if you're doing it yourself as a small business owner, or you have somebody working in an HR function, maybe an outsourced company that's assisting you with it, or you have an admin person who is doubling as an HR, which typically tends to be the case for a lot of SMEs, right? It's usually that they have an admin person who is / human resources, right? And most of the time, they're not really equipped to deal with the full gamut of requirements that's needed to manage personnel. And then obviously the ethics component is very, very big because personal integrity is personal integrity, right? I mean, how do you police that when everybody has their own set of values, right? So if you don't have that proper structure in place, it can be very, very difficult. So from the SME perspective, I would say managing the integrity of personnel and ensuring that everybody does right by the business, and vice versa as well, holding the business accountable to employees is something that I've seen has been a challenge for a lot of small businesses in Nigeria.
Thank you. Quite insightful. So let's still stay with you and just have you still touch on some of the things that you have mentioned. So what are the practical ways that what are the practical things that can be done to ensure that, yes, we talked about the integrity aspect and then people having different values, right? So what are the practical things that can be done just to ensure that we are all on the same track, and also to ensure that we're all having close to the same experiences, right? Where the kind of, let's say, onboarding that I have as a new employee today is similar to the kind of onboarding that another person we have, simply because there's something that, is guiding us. So what are the practical things that you would recommend for these SMEs, especially in situations where people tend to, because of their size and because of their bottom line, they are trying to merge HR and admin. So you are an admin person and you just say, help us look into HR, right? So what are the practical ways that they can streamline things to make sure that values are aligned and then there's consistency in what they're doing?
So I'd say, for SMEs in particular, larger organizations typically already tend to have a lot of these structures in place, right? For SMEs, it's very, very important for entrepreneurs to understand the importance of structure when it comes to your human capital, right? So you have employees who, you may be a startup, you may be a 2 or 3 man business at the time, maybe founders, and you want to start hiring your first few set of like key employees to join your team. They're going to mimic your culture, the culture of your, whatever your own personality and your habits are, because at that point, that is the business, right? So it's very, very important that immediately, right from the very beginning, before you've made your very first hire, you already know what you intend for your company culture to be, right? And invest in the resources to put that structure in place, right? So if you're not necessarily going to have an HR manager right off the bat, right, you can engage a consultant to put the structure in place for you in terms of what the culture of your company should be like, what the roles and responsibilities, the functions, and the objectives of these new hires that are coming into the company, right? And you have to start imbibing those practices and those cultures yourself so that when your very first employee comes, they can see that there's already this culture in place, right? Because you see a lot of companies grow from SMEs to large scale companies, and they still run like a one-man business where the culture of the founder from 10, 15, 20 years ago still permeates through and is still active in a large scale business. And of course, we see that across the Nigerian business landscape, right? So if you want to make sure that the culture that you want is something that is imbibed by all your current or future employees, you have to start living it from day one. So I'll say that's probably the biggest advice I would give to SMEs, putting structure in place. Make sure that you start living that culture that you want your future employees to adopt right from the onset.
Thank you. I think that's quite instructive because, again, if you don't have, it's actually okay for the culture of the company to reflect the owner of the business, as long as it's on the positive side.
Absolutely.
There are business owners that they are all about execution, and then you see in their businesses that people get things done. However you want. So if they want to describe their culture, they will tell you we're focused on execution here, we execute, right? So it's okay for an organization to have the personality of the founder as the culture. Maybe just to summarize it in my own way, I would say that you should lay the right HR foundation as you start your business. Thank you very much for that insight, Tomiwa. So Chinwe, I'll go back to the example that you gave us, of the CEO that absconded.
He came back. He eventually came back.
Okay, so what would be your guidance on that? I mean, what should have been done better?
So I feel that, was communication was very important. We were a small team in terms of leads, middle managers. And I felt that giving each and every one of us the same language, information in particular, rather than one person gatekeeping that information, because that's what ended up happening. And if that was done, we would have managed everyone's reaction, because what ended up was people started just walking away, moving away, because they saw that this was no longer fitting them. There was a disconnect. They weren't being carried along. So in terms of, for example, this was a one-man business. It had evolved for over about 7-10 years. So it was no longer in the startup phase. It should have been in that phase of really maturing, but still the mentality of I still have to gatekeep every single information or every single thing that happens in the business, rather than including my middle managers in what's going on. I think sometimes that is the error that business owners make. HR is there to help. We might be advocates, but we are also strategic partners as well. So including us in that kind of discussion as things evolve. If the business is having difficulty, of course, we understand the impact on how to restructure and resize and all. So that disconnect, that communication breakage exactly could have been done a lot better. Because I feel that during that period, we did lose so many good hands that shouldn't have gone. So losing them ended up then trying to recruit people, and being a tech business, we trained them, and all was just a lot of time lost, resources lost as well. So communication,
Wow. So communication would have helped better in that regard. I mean, that's quite instructive, the communication, and also, seeing the HR as your strategic partner, carrying them along in conversations that have to do with the humans, right? And the business as a whole. And then it positions HR in a good way where HR is able to advise and also ensures that communication is as transparent as possible, and that the employees are carried along in all the situation. I mean, they had to lose very good hands, which of course there's the cost of hiring as well. Exactly. The time that would have passed on things that could have been done and all of it. So what I'm actually also getting from what you have just shared is, there's a lot you lose when you don't tend to do things properly. Definitely. You actually lose a lot. Just that because we don't, again, I think it also comes to data, because there are certain types of data that we don't even bother about, we don't capture, so we don't get to know the actual impact of some of these behaviors or the actions that we take. Thank you. That was quite insightful. So I would just, in closing, right, I would want to take like a closing statement from you both. So what would, it could be advice to employers. You've touched on some points that's almost like advisory to the employers and also to the HR professionals as well. So any closing statement, Chinwe, ladies first, I'll come to you. Okay, so, any closing statement from your end?
I think when it comes to whether it's HR or the people, for business owners to really understand that every single person in an organization is invested in their goal for the business. And it takes a lot for you to also invite them or bring them to that table, every single person, whether it's the security guard, an office assistant, everyone is invested in you ensuring that your goals are achieved. And when there is a disconnect, whether in communication, even in simple things as an onboarding process, and it's everyone is part of the onboarding process. From the moment someone comes in, them being included in terms of where the business is heading, how their role contributes to the overall goal of the business. I've said goal multiple times. So that inclusion and that allowance and that access, whether it's from the team lead, from the CEO, will really help the business. I think many people just end up thinking their job is to come in, clock in, and go out. By the end of the day, I also want to feel fulfilled. I want to see how the fruit of my labor, whether it's the bottom line, whatever it is, I want to see that impact. And being carried along from understanding how my individual goals contribute to my departmental goals, to the corporate goals, is what every single person wants to see in any organization. Yeah.
But you very much, Chinwe, for the insights. Tomiwa?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you've said, everything you've said actually. But just to say, again, it's about the culture, right? So if you're able to establish a culture from the beginning, whatever you do basically in your business becomes your culture, right? Every kind of activity, whether it be, for the core business or if it's just like a support function, every activity that's taking place within a business ultimately becomes your culture. So whatever you allow and whatever is repeated becomes the nature of the way your business is run, right? So I think, advice to businesses would be to make sure that you take that very, very seriously. All the little activities, whether it be the way you communicate internally, the way employees treat one another, whether people are proactive or not, the way they respond to instruction, every single thing that you do in a business, right, becomes your culture ultimately. So if you want your business to function a certain way, you really have to set the groundwork from day one and insist on it, right? So you have to have like very, very little tolerance for deviations from what you actually want to achieve, because people make a company, right? And personalities can be very, very strong, right? Even executives can be influenced, right, by the culture of their employees. So if you have somebody who's not a very strong leader, who is, seeking advice or counsel from, managers or external parties, or even being open to, what employees are doing generally within an organization, that person, even at the top, can start to get influenced by his subordinates. And a lot of people don't realize that. They feel like everything comes from the top down, but you can be influenced by anybody. You know, a chairman of a company, like we like to use the term chairman a lot in Nigeria, even if it's just the managing director or an executive of a company, can still be influenced by somebody who's reporting to them. It may be very subtle and it may creep in over time, but you start to incorporate these habits, and before you know it, like you've kind of changed course from where you were intending to go initially. So I know I keep harping on culture because it really is very important.
Yeah,
and I think it ties into, you know, what Chinwe was saying as well. So I think focus on where you want to be, and from day one start creating that culture, the patterns, the habits, everything that you want to do, and eventually it'll manifest.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that just to build a should I use the word a ladder, using what the two of you have spoken about. So you have been a lot on from the start, build the right foundation. And I think that if you build the right foundation, also having in mind what your end game is, where you're going, and also building to last, right? Knowing that you're going to get bigger someday. So is this what you would want to see even when you get bigger? So if that's it, then start it from the get-go. And then Chinwe has hammered a lot on communication, you know, carrying the leaders along, carrying HR along, ensuring that we are all on the same page. And I feel that if you lay the right foundation from the beginning and your communication is on point, you're good to go. Because at every point, if there are changes, if there are things you need to change, communication will help you. But you've already laid the right foundation. So you're just building on it. And in building, you're communicating what you're building. You're transparent about it. And it takes
if I could just interject there.
Sure.
So obviously it's very important to have the right foundation, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't be flexible.
Of
right?
course not.
And in the event that you don't have the right foundation, what do you now do? Right? You can always course correct. So once you've identified the problem, you can rebuild. Right. But at the moment where you feel like you know where you need to go, you can rebuild that foundation. Absolutely. So essentially it's not just about always getting it right from the beginning. Most companies don't get it right from the beginning. But if you have that mindset going in, at whatever stage you are, whether you're at the beginning or your startup, you're a growth stage, or you're already an established company, if you're not where you want to go, you need to imagine what that image, that company looks like, that organization that you aspire to be. If you're not in line with that, then you need to restructure and rebuild the foundation. So I would say always keeping your eyes on the goal and working towards what you want to be.
Absolutely. I mean, the flexibility would also work with communication, right?
Exactly.
So you didn't get it right from the beginning, but you want to rebuild, you want to change things. All you need to do is communicate and then, you know, embark on the changes that you want to make. It makes it easier for you to change things that you need to change because you're communicating, because people understand where you're coming from and they understand where you're going. Even if they don't understand where you're coming from, they understand what the current issues are and they understand where you want to be. So it's easier for them to, you know, accept the things that you're saying that you want to do because you have communicated clearly to them. They definitely understand.
And it's natural to evolve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very natural to evolve. So thank you both. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just one more question before I let you go. So I would like to take suggestions from you. So what would you recommend that we address on this platform? Chinwe.
I think in terms of, how would I put it, more about job fulfillment in the sense of, because there are certain people as we have more Gen Zs come in, they will constantly evolve as well, grow, whether it's the same company or otherwise, and that means interest and all. So that opportunity where organizations need to be like a breeding ground for people to grow and maybe experience it through and through, so that they can have a bigger and better idea of, you know, is this the right role for me? Am I being satisfied in this function? So companies having that kind of flexibility for young, new talents coming in to really experience things thoroughly. So that's something, you know, I would like most organizations, or, you know, that kind of discussion around maybe internal mobility, growth, and all. Yeah.
Thank you, Chinwe. I have noted that around job fulfillment, looking into internal mobility, growth, even if it's not internal mobility, just helping you to grow or helping you or showing you what the growth path is within. And of course, if you decide to leave, you have an idea
Exactly.
of the way. Thank you very much, Chinwe. Tomiwa.
Interesting topic for another show. I think something around the future of work in the age of sort of in the artificial intelligence age, I think would be interesting.
Okay.
Obviously, there's been a wave of new technologies that have come in as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, which is going to be transformative. It's already transforming the workforce, right? And that's only going to accelerate over the next, few months and years. So I think that'd be interesting to talk about the dynamics, how that would change with, HR. Will the HR function even still exist at some point when when you have
Human
AI
element
handling all of
to
that?
HR.
Will all admin or internal back office or front office functions even still exist? A year from now, we don't know. All right. So that probably be interesting. I'd actually be happy to come back and have a
Wow.
talk about that.
Thank you so much for that commitment. We're definitely bringing you back for us to have that conversation, because yes, it's very topical at this time. There's a lot of buzz around the AI and the fear of, am I losing my job? Am I going to lose my job? Will I still be relevant? And all of it. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
And will the AI be sensitive to your emotional needs?
Is AI empathetic?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for being on this episode with us. Thank you for your
thanks for,
insights. Very brilliant
having us.
insights. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you for joining us. Again, please don't forget to engage with us on the comments below. Let's hear from you. Let's get your feedback. And also let's have topic suggestions from you on what you would like us to discuss. Thank you.